Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead as he carried the last box into his new apartment. The cramped studio on Europa Station wasn't much, but it was all he could afford on his xenobiology research stipend. What made it bearable was splitting the rent with his roommate, though he'd never actually met them in person. The housing algorithm had matched him with someone called Zixthara, which sounded alien enough. Most humans preferred living with their own species, but Marcus had always been fascinated by alien cultures. Growing up on Earth, he'd dreamed of the day he could work alongside other sentient species in the galaxy. The door chimed, and Marcus looked up to see his roommate for the first time. Zixthara stood about 7 feet tall with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer under the station's artificial lighting. Their elongated head held 2 large dark eyes that blinked in a peculiar sideways motion. 4 arms extended from their torso, each ending in delicate, finger-like appendages. "Greetings, Marcus Chen," Zixthara said in perfect standard English, though their voice carried an odd melodic quality. "I am pleased to finally meet my cohabitation partner." Marcus grinned and extended his hand. "Nice to meet you too, Zix. Mind if I call you Zix?" The alien stared at his outstretched hand with obvious confusion. "What is the purpose of this gesture?" "It's a handshake, a greeting custom where I come from." Marcus demonstrated by taking one of Zix's hands and gently shaking it. "Like this." Zix's eyes widened with fascination. "Remarkable. Physical contact as a social ritual. This is not practiced among my people, the Velthani. We communicate primarily through bioelectric field modulation." Over the following weeks, Marcus discovered that his roommate was incredibly curious about human behavior. Zix worked as a cultural anthropologist for the Galactic Coalition, studying different species' social structures. They had requested a human roommate specifically to observe human customs in their natural habitat. At first, Marcus found Zix's constant questions endearing. The alien would watch him eat breakfast and ask detailed questions about human nutrition. They observed his exercise routine with scientific interest, taking notes on their portable datapad. When Marcus video called his family back on Earth, Zix listened intently to the conversations, trying to understand human family dynamics. "Your species maintains emotional bonds across vast distances," Zix observed one evening as Marcus finished a call with his sister. "This is quite extraordinary. Most sentient species only form attachments within immediate proximity. Family is important to humans," Marcus explained, settling onto the couch. "We're social creatures. We need connections with others." Zix joined him on the couch, their forearms allowing them to continue taking notes while maintaining what they'd learned was appropriate human conversational posture. "I have observed that humans engage in many forms of social bonding. Some appear to be romantic in nature." Marcus nodded, pulling up a movie on the wall screen. "Yeah, humans pair bond. It's one of our strongest drives, actually. Love, romance, all that." "Fascinating," Zix murmured, their eyes fixed on Marcus rather than the screen. "And this pair bonding involves physical contact similar to your greeting ritual?" "Among other things," Marcus said, suddenly feeling a bit awkward. He'd noticed Zix paying particular attention whenever he'd had friends over, especially when his friend Sarah had visited last week. The alien had watched them hug goodbye with the intensity of a scientist observing a rare phenomenon. As the movie played, Marcus became aware that Zix wasn't watching the screen at all. Instead, they were studying his reactions to the romantic scenes with uncomfortable intensity. Every time the characters kissed or embraced, Zix would lean closer, their large eyes reflecting the screen's glow. The male character appears to be experiencing elevated heart rate and perspiration, Zix noted during a particularly steamy scene. "Is this typical of human mating behavior?" Marcus nearly choked on his drink. "Mating behavior? It's just a movie, Zix. But the physiological responses are genuine, are they not? Your own heart rate has increased and I detect elevated skin temperature." Marcus paused the movie and turned to face his roommate. "Look, Zix, I appreciate your scientific interest, but human sexuality is kind of a private thing. It's not really something we discuss casually." "Private?" Zix's head tilted in confusion. "But it is a fundamental biological function. How can the study of reproduction be private?" "It just is. Different species, different customs, you know?" But Zix's expression suggested they didn't know at all. In fact, Marcus realized with growing unease that his explanation had only made his roommate more curious. The alien's eyes had taken on the gleam of a researcher who'd just discovered an unexplored territory. The next few days confirmed Marcus's suspicions. Zix began asking increasingly specific questions about human relationships. They wanted to know about dating rituals, courtship displays, and what they called pre-mating social contracts. When Marcus tried to deflect with humor or change the subject, Zix would simply file away his reactions as additional data points. "I have been reviewing human entertainment media," Zix announced one morning over breakfast. "Your species appears to have complex rituals surrounding reproductive behavior. There are multiple phases involving gift exchange, synchronized consumption of food, and elaborate verbal negotiations." Marcus looked up from his cereal. "You've been watching dating shows?" "I have consumed approximately 47 hours of what your databases classify as romantic comedies and reality dating programs," Zix replied proudly. "The data is most illuminating." "Oh no," Marcus muttered. "Zix, you can't learn about human relationships from TV shows. That's not how real life works." "Then perhaps you could provide direct observation data," Zix suggested hopefully. "Do you engage in mating rituals yourself?" Marcus felt his cheeks burning. "I'm not having this conversation." "Your facial coloration has changed," Zix noted with excitement, pulling out their data pad.
This appears to be an involuntary physiological response to discussing reproductive topics.
"Most fascinating." As Marcus fled to his room, he could hear Zix muttering to themselves about courtship embarrassment, displays, and mate selection anxiety. Indicators. He realized with growing horror that he'd somehow become the primary subject in his roommate's research project on human sexuality. What had started as innocent scientific curiosity was clearly evolving into something far more complicated. Marcus just hoped he could find a way to redirect Zix's attention before things got completely out of hand. Unfortunately, he had no idea that his alien roommate's research was about to attract the attention of the entire galactic coalition. Marcus thought things couldn't get worse until he came home to find Zix had transformed their shared living space into what looked like a scientific laboratory. Charts covered the walls, displaying what appeared to be detailed diagrams of human social interactions. His roommate had somehow acquired a holographic projector and was using it to display three-dimensional models of human couples in various poses. "Welcome home, Marcus," Zix called out cheerfully, waving all four arms in an enthusiastic greeting they'd learned from human entertainment media. "I have made significant progress in my research today." Marcus stared at a hologram showing two humans holding hands, with arrows pointing to various contact points and notes written in Velthani script floating around the image. "Zix, what is all this?" "I have expanded my study parameters," Zix explained, their eyes bright with scientific fervor. "After our conversation yesterday, I realized I was approaching human reproductive behavior from an incomplete perspective. I have now cataloged over 300 distinct human courtship behaviors across 17 different cultural subgroups." Marcus walked closer to the wall charts, his mouth falling open as he read the titles. "Categories of human physical affection, escalation patterns in romantic relationships, and physiological markers of human sexual interest were just a few of the topics his roommate had been researching. "This is insane. Zix, you can't just study humans like we're lab specimens." "But you are specimens," Zix replied with innocent confusion. "All sentient beings are subjects of scientific study. The Galactic Coalition maintains detailed behavioral databases on over 2,000 species. However, human reproductive patterns are notably underrepresented in our records." Marcus sank onto the couch, avoiding looking at a hologram that showed what appeared to be a detailed analysis of human kissing techniques. "That's because most species respect privacy boundaries." "Privacy," Zix repeated the word like they were tasting something foreign. "Yes, you mentioned this concept before. I have been researching privacy as well." They gestured to another chart titled Human Privacy Paradoxes. "Your species maintains selective transparency regarding reproductive behaviors. You will discuss them openly in entertainment media and academic contexts, yet become distressed when observed directly." "It's not a paradox," Marcus protested. "It's just personal." "But that is precisely what makes it paradoxical," Zix exclaimed, their forearms moving in animated gestures. "If reproduction is merely personal, why does your species create elaborate public displays around it? Wedding ceremonies, anniversary celebrations, romantic restaurants designed specifically for courtship rituals." Marcus had to admit that Zix had a point, though he wasn't about to encourage this line of research. Look, can you at least take down the charts? It's weird having my relationship life analyzed on our living room walls. You have relationship life? Zix perked up immediately. I was not aware you were currently engaged in mating behaviors. This presents an excellent opportunity for direct observation. I meant hypothetically, Marcus said quickly, but it was too late. His roommate was already pulling up new files on their datapad. I have prepared a comprehensive questionnaire about human romantic experiences, Zix announced. Would you be willing to participate? The data would be invaluable for my research. Marcus looked at the questionnaire Zix held out and immediately regretted it. Questions like, at what frequency do you experience reproductive urges? And how do you select potential mates from the general population? Stared back at him. Absolutely not. Perhaps a modified approach would be more acceptable, Zix suggested thoughtfully. I could observe your interactions with potential mates in natural settings. I understand humans often gather in social spaces specifically for courtship purposes. You want to follow me to bars and take notes? The research value would be extraordinary, Zix said, completely missing Marcus's horrified tone. Field observation in natural habitat conditions provides far more accurate data than laboratory studies. Before Marcus could respond, his communication device chimed with an incoming call. Sarah's face appeared on the screen, and Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. He'd been hoping she would call back after their last conversation. Hey, Marcus, Sarah said with a warm smile. I was wondering if you wanted to grab dinner tonight. I found this great little place that serves actual Earth food. Sure, Marcus replied, acutely aware that Zix had moved closer and was now taking notes on their datapad. What time works for you? How about 7? It's casual, so just wear whatever. As they made plans, Marcus noticed Zix frantically scribbling notes. When he ended the call, his roommate looked up with barely contained excitement. This is perfect, Zix exclaimed. You are engaging in a courtship ritual tonight. May I accompany you for observational purposes? What? No. Absolutely not. I would remain unobtrusive, Zix promised. Many humans bring companions to social gatherings. I could pose as your friend. Marcus imagined trying to explain to Sarah why his 7-foot blue roommate was taking notes during their dinner. Zix, you can't just follow me on a date. Date! Zix repeated with delight. Yes, I have read about this ritual. A formal courtship meeting designed to assess reproductive compatibility. The fact that you are nervous confirms that you view this female as a potential mate. I'm not nervous, Marcus lied, though his elevated heart rate probably betrayed him to Zix's enhanced senses. Your physiological responses indicate otherwise, Zix observed. Increased perspiration, elevated voice pitch, rapid speech patterns. These are all classic indicators of what humans call romantic anxiety. Marcus grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. I'm leaving now. Please don't follow me. But the research opportunity, no following, Marcus called back as the door closed behind him. Unfortunately, Marcus had underestimated his roommate's dedication to scientific inquiry. When he arrived at the restaurant and saw Sarah waiting at a corner table, everything seemed perfect. She looked beautiful in a simple blue dress, and she'd chosen a cozy spot with soft lighting that made her eyes sparkle. They were halfway through their appetizers when Marcus noticed a familiar figure attempting to hide behind a potted plant near the restaurant's entrance. Zix had somehow acquired what appeared to be human clothing, though the disguise was hardly convincing. The sleeves of the oversized coat couldn't fully conceal their forearms, and no amount of creative hat positioning could hide their distinctive elongated head. Marcus? Sarah followed his gaze. Is everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Something like that, Marcus muttered, watching as Zix tried to peer around the plant while simultaneously taking notes on their datapad. The evening went downhill from there. Every time Marcus tried to focus on Sarah, he could see his roommate documenting their interactions. When he and Sarah held hands across the table, Zix practically vibrated with excitement. When Sarah laughed at one of his jokes and touched his arm, Marcus swore he could see his roommate making detailed notes about positive tactile reinforcement in human courtship displays. By the time they finished dinner, Marcus was so distracted that Sarah noticed something was wrong. Are you sure you're okay? She asked as they walked toward the transport station. You seem really nervous tonight. I'm fine, Marcus insisted, though he could see Zix following them at what the alien probably thought was a discreet distance. Just work stuff on my mind, When Sarah leaned in to kiss him goodnight, Marcus was mortified to realize that Zix had somehow gotten close enough to record the entire interaction. As Sarah's lips met his, he could practically feel his roommate's scientific analysis burning into the back of his head. "I had a really nice time," Sarah said softly. "Call me tomorrow?" "Definitely," Marcus replied, though he was already dreading the conversation he'd have to have with Zix when he got home. As Sarah's transport pulled away, Marcus turned to confront his roommate, but Zix had vanished. When he arrived back at their apartment, he found his roommate hunched over their data pad, frantically entering new information. "Marcus," Zix looked up with glowing eyes. "That was absolutely fascinating. I observed at least 17 distinct courtship behaviors, including what I believe was a successful mating negotiation sequence. It was just a goodnight kiss," Marcus said wearily. "But the ritual complexity was extraordinary," Zix continued, oblivious to Marcus's exhaustion. "The prolonged eye contact, the synchronized breathing patterns, the careful positioning of hands and bodies. Human courtship is far more sophisticated than our databases indicated." Marcus collapsed onto the couch, realizing that his simple desire for an alien roommate had somehow turned him into the unwilling star of what was apparently becoming the galaxy's most comprehensive study of human romantic behavior. And based on the excited gleam in Zix's eyes, this was only the beginning. Marcus woke up the next morning to find Zix in the kitchen, surrounded by what appeared to be every romance novel ever written. Digital books floated in holographic displays around the alien's head, while they simultaneously read multiple texts, their forearms allowing them to take notes at superhuman speed. "Good morning, Marcus," Zix called out cheerfully. "I have been conducting supplementary research all night. Did you know that humans have created over 50 million fictional narratives about romantic relationships? The cultural significance is staggering." Marcus poured himself coffee with shaking hands. He'd barely slept, haunted by nightmares of Zix presenting his love life to the Galactic Council as a case study. "Zix, we need to talk about boundaries." "Boundaries," Zix repeated thoughtfully. "Yes, this concept appears frequently in human romantic literature. Apparently, establishing clear parameters for acceptable behavior is crucial for successful human pair bonding." "Exactly. And one of my boundaries is that you can't spy on my dates anymore." Zix's expression fell, but the observational data was invaluable. "I documented 17 previously unknown human courtship behaviors. The scientific community will be fascinated by the complexity of your species' pre-mating rituals." "Pre-mating rituals?" Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. "It was just dinner and a kiss, which, according to human romantic literature, typically serves as the initial phase of the mate selection process," Zix explained patiently. "The data indicates a 73.2% probability that you will engage in further courtship activities with this female." Marcus was about to argue when his communication device chimed. Sarah's face appeared on the screen, and Marcus felt his stomach drop when he saw her expression. "Marcus, we need to talk," Sarah said, her voice unusually serious. "Can you meet me at the Nebula Cafe in an hour?" "Is everything okay?" Marcus asked, though something in her tone suggested it wasn't. "Just meet me there," Sarah replied before ending the call. Zix looked up from their romance novels with interest. The female's vocal patterns indicated emotional distress. This could be evidence of courtship complications. "May I observe?" "No," Marcus snapped. "Whatever's wrong, your research probably caused it." An hour later, Marcus sat across from Sarah in the cafe, watching her stir her drink nervously. She looked beautiful as always, but there was something different in her eyes, something that made Marcus's heart sink. "Marcus, I had a really nice time last night," Sarah began carefully. "But I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest." "Okay," Marcus said, though he had a sinking feeling he knew where this was going. "Were you having me followed last night?" Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "What do you mean?" "There was this person who seemed to be watching us all evening. They followed us from the restaurant to the transport station. A friend of mine saw them taking pictures or videos." Sarah leaned forward, her expression serious. "Marcus, if you're the kind of guy who has people spy on dates, I need to know now." "It's not what you think," Marcus said quickly. "I can explain. So you admit someone was following us?" Marcus ran his hands through his hair, trying to figure out how to explain the situation without sounding completely insane. "It's my roommate." "They're doing research." "Research?" Sarah's eyebrows shot up. What kind of research requires spying on people's dates? Cultural anthropology, Marcus said weakly. They're studying human social behavior. And you thought it was okay to make me part of some experiment without asking? Sarah's voice rose, causing other cafe patrons to look in their direction. No, I told them not to follow us. I had no idea they would actually do it. Sarah stared at him for a long moment. Marcus, this is really weird. I don't know what kind of situation you have with your roommate, but I don't want to be studied like some kind of lab rat. I completely understand, Marcus said desperately. It won't happen again. I'll make sure of it. I think I need some time to think about this, Sarah said, standing up. Don't call me for a while, okay? Marcus watched her leave, feeling like his stomach had been ripped out. When he got home, he found Zix exactly where he'd left them, still surrounded by romance novels. How did your secondary courtship meeting proceed? Zix asked brightly. Based on the literature, follow-up encounters within 24 hours typically indicate strong romantic interest. She broke up with me, Marcus said flatly. Zix's eyes widened. Broke up? But you were not yet pair-bonded. How can a relationship be terminated before it officially begins? Because you scared her off. Marcus exploded. She thought I was some kind of creep who has people spy on dates. But I was conducting legitimate scientific observation, Zix protested. My research could revolutionize the galaxy's understanding of human reproductive behavior. I don't care about your research, Marcus shouted. You ruined my chance with someone I really liked. For the first time since they'd started living together, Zix looked genuinely confused. They tilted their head in that characteristic way, their large eyes reflecting Marcus's obvious distress. I do not understand, Zix said slowly. The pursuit of scientific knowledge is the highest calling among my people. Why would you prioritize a single romantic encounter over contributing to galactic understanding? Because that's what humans do, Marcus said, sinking onto the couch. We care more about personal relationships than abstract knowledge. Love matters more to us than data. Zix was quiet for a long moment, their forearms moving in what Marcus had learned was a sign of deep thought among their species. Love, Zix repeated the word carefully. This concept appears frequently in your literature, but I am struggling to understand its practical function. It seems to cause humans significant emotional distress. Love isn't practical, Marcus explained. It's not supposed to be. It's about caring for someone else more than yourself. It's about wanting to share your life with another person, not because it makes logical sense, but because being with them makes everything better. But your interaction with the female was terminated due to my research activities, Zix observed. If love is so important, why did such a minor interference cause complete relationship failure? Marcus looked at his roommate, realizing that despite all their research, Zix had completely missed the most fundamental aspect of human relationships. Because love requires trust, Marcus said. Sarah couldn't trust me after what happened. Without trust, you can't have love. Zix stared at him for a long moment, then began frantically taking notes on their data pad. Wait, stop, Marcus said. Don't turn this into more research. This is exactly the problem. But you have provided crucial insight into human emotional mechanisms, Zix explained. The connection between trust and romantic bonding was not clearly established in any of my source materials. Marcus felt a new kind of frustration building. Zix, do you understand why I'm upset right now? Your romantic relationship has been terminated due to my research activities, Zix replied promptly. You are experiencing what humans call heartbreak, which appears to be a form of emotional pain caused by romantic disappointment. And how does that make you feel? Zix paused, their datapad hovering forgotten in one hand. Feel? I'm not certain I understand the question. Don't you care that your research hurt me? That it cost me something important? Zix's large eyes blinked in that sideways motion that Marcus had learned indicated deep confusion among their species. I don't care about the accuracy of my research. I care about contributing to scientific knowledge. But do you care about me? As a person, not as a research subject. The question seemed to break something in Zix's scientific worldview. They stared at Marcus for a long moment, their forearms trembling slightly. I do not know, Zix admitted quietly. My species does not experience emotional attachment the way humans do. We form functional partnerships based on mutual benefit and shared goals. The concept of caring for another individual's well-being above scientific advancement is foreign to me. Marcus felt a strange mix of anger and pity. Then maybe you need to learn about more than just human mating habits. Maybe you need to understand what it means to be human at all. As if summoned by the emotional weight of the conversation, Marcus's communication device chimed with an incoming priority message. The Galactic Coalition seal appeared on the screen, and both Marcus and Zix froze. Dr. Zix Ithera, a formal voice announced. You are hereby requested to present your research findings to the Coalition Council within 48 hours. Your preliminary reports on human reproductive behavior have generated significant interest among member species. Marcus looked at his roommate in horror. You've been reporting to the Coalition? Zix's skin had gone pale blue to almost white. It is standard protocol to share significant cultural discoveries with the galactic community. You've been sharing details about my personal life with alien governments? Not just your personal life, Zix said weakly. I may have included observational data on several dozen humans I have encountered during my research. Marcus stared at his roommate as the full scope of the situation began to dawn on him. This wasn't just about his relationship with Sarah anymore. Somehow, Zix's innocent curiosity about human dating had spiraled into something that could affect humanity's standing in the galactic community, and they had 48 hours to figure out what to do about it. Marcus spent the next 12 hours pacing their apartment while Zix worked frantically to prepare their presentation for the Galactic Coalition. The alien had transformed their living space into what looked like mission control, with holographic displays showing charts, graphs, and detailed analyses of human romantic behavior. This is a disaster, Marcus muttered, watching Zix organize data files with all four arms. Do you have any idea what you've done? I have compiled the most comprehensive study of human reproductive behavior in galactic history, Zix replied, their voice carrying a mix of pride and anxiety. The Coalition has specifically requested information about human pair bonding rituals, emotional attachment mechanisms, and what they termed romantic compatibility assessments. Marcus stopped pacing. Why would they want to know about that? Zix hesitated, their skin shifting to a deeper blue shade that Marcus had learned indicated nervousness. There may have been some diplomatic complications recently. What kind of complications? Several Coalition member species have attempted to establish romantic relationships with humans without understanding proper protocols, Zix admitted. Apparently, a Zerani diplomat tried to court a human ambassador by presenting her with the severed head of his greatest enemy, which is considered the highest form of romantic gesture among his people. Marcus winced. I'm guessing that didn't go well. The human female filed a complaint with the Interspecies Relations Committee and requested immediate transfer to a different sector, Zix continued. Similar incidents have occurred with Thraxian mating displays, which involve ritual combat and Quellan courtship songs, which apparently cause severe auditory damage to human hearing organs. So the Coalition wants your research to help other species understand how to date humans? Essentially, yes, Zix said, pulling up a new holographic display. They believe that improved understanding of human romantic behavior will facilitate better diplomatic relations and potentially lead to successful interspecies partnerships. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Interspecies partnerships? You mean aliens want to date humans? The galaxy is vast and lonely, Zix explained. Many species have expressed interest in the human capacity for emotional bonding. Your ability to form lasting attachments regardless of physical compatibility is considered quite remarkable. But that's exactly the problem, Marcus exclaimed. You can't just create a manual for dating humans. Every person is different. What works for one human might be completely wrong for another. Zix tilted their head in confusion. But my research has identified clear patterns in human courtship behavior. Gift-giving, shared meals, physical contact, verbal affirmations of affection. These appear to be universal across human cultures. Those are just general trends, Marcus argued. Real relationships are about getting to know someone as an individual, not following a script. I do not understand the distinction, Zix admitted. If the behaviors are consistent across the species, why would individual variation matter? Marcus realized that his roommate's entire approach to understanding humans was fundamentally flawed. Zix saw patterns and protocols where humans experienced emotions and connections. Let me ask you something, Marcus said. Why did you want to study human relationships in the first place? Because they represent a unique form of social bonding not found in other species, Zix replied promptly. The combination of emotional attachment, physical attraction, and long-term partnership commitment creates a complex behavioral matrix worthy of scientific investigation. But do you understand why humans want those things? Zix paused, their large eyes blinking in that sideways motion. For reproductive purposes? No, Zix. Most human relationships aren't about reproduction. We fall in love because it makes us happy. We want to share our lives with someone because being alone is hard. We form emotional bonds because caring for someone else gives our lives meaning. Meaning. Zix repeated the word slowly. You have mentioned this concept before, but I struggle to understand its practical application. Marcus sat down across from his roommate, suddenly understanding the real problem. Zix, do you ever feel lonely? Lonely? I am rarely without intellectual stimulation. My research keeps me quite occupied. That's not what I mean. Do you ever wish you had someone to share your thoughts with? Someone who cared about your feelings, not just your work? Zix was quiet for a long moment, their forearms moving in slow, contemplative gestures. I sometimes wonder what it would be like to have someone celebrate my discoveries with me. Among my people, scientific achievement is acknowledged but not celebrated. Success is expected, not shared. That sounds lonely to me, Marcus said gently. But loneliness is an inefficient emotional state, Zix protested. It serves no evolutionary purpose. Maybe that's where you're wrong, Marcus suggested. Maybe loneliness exists because connection is important. Maybe the fact that humans need love isn't a weakness but a strength. Before Zix could respond, Marcus's communication device chimed with an urgent message from the coalition. A stern-faced Bolian official appeared on the screen. Dr. Zix Thara, we have received reports that your research methods may have violated several interspecies ethics protocols. You are required to appear before the ethics committee immediately following your presentation. The connection ended, leaving Marcus and Zix staring at each other in shock. Ethics violations? Marcus asked. I may have failed to obtain proper consent forms from my human subjects, Zix admitted quietly. You mean you've been studying other humans without their permission too? I observed public behavior and recorded publicly available information, Zix said defensively. Among my people, such research is perfectly acceptable. Well, we're not your people, Marcus pointed out. Humans have different ideas about privacy and consent. Zix's skin had gone almost white with worry. If the ethics committee determines that my research methods were inappropriate, I could face expulsion from the coalition. My academic career would be destroyed. For the first time since they'd started living together, Marcus saw his roommate not as an annoying alien studying him like a lab rat, but as a person who was scared and in trouble. Despite everything Zix had put him through, Marcus found himself feeling sorry for them. Maybe there's a way to fix this, Marcus said thoughtfully. How? I cannot undo the research I have already conducted. No, but you could change your approach. Instead of presenting humans as subjects to be studied, what if you presented us as partners to be understood? Zix looked confused. I do not see the distinction. The difference is consent and cooperation, Marcus explained. What if instead of giving the coalition a manual for dating humans, you taught them how to ask humans what they want? What if your presentation focused on communication and respect instead of behavioral patterns? But that would require abandoning most of my research data, Zix protested. Maybe that's exactly what you need to do, Marcus said. Maybe the problem isn't that other species don't understand human dating customs. Maybe the problem is that they're trying to follow customs instead of building actual relationships. Zix stared at him for a long moment, their large eyes reflecting the holographic displays around them. You are suggesting that I recommend a completely different approach to interspecies romantic connections. I'm suggesting you tell them the truth about humans, Marcus said. That we're individuals who want to be treated with respect and understanding, not puzzles to be solved with the right combination of gifts and gestures. This would be a fundamental departure from standard xenological research methodology, Zix mused. Good, Marcus said firmly, because the standard methodology is what got us into this mess. Zix was quiet for several minutes, their forearms moving in complex patterns as they processed this new perspective. Finally, they looked up at Marcus with something that might have been understanding in their large, dark eyes. If I were to adopt this approach, I would require assistance from someone with actual experience in human relationships, Zix said slowly. You mean like a human consultant? I mean like a friend, Zix replied, and Marcus realized that his alien roommate was finally beginning to understand what that word meant. Marcus thought about Sarah, about his ruined chances with her, about all the ways Zix's research had turned his life upside down. Then he looked at his roommate, who despite everything was still just a curious alien trying to understand a universe that didn't always make sense. Okay, Marcus said, let's figure out how to save both your career and humanity's dignity. As they began working together to completely restructure Zix's presentation, Marcus couldn't help but think that maybe his roommate was about to learn the most important lesson about human relationships of all. Sometimes the best connections come from the most unexpected places. Working through the night, Marcus and Zix completely reimagined the presentation. Instead of charts analyzing human mating behaviors, they created a guide focused on communication, respect, and understanding. Marcus shared stories from his own dating experiences, both successful and disastrous, while Zix translated these personal anecdotes into principles that other species could understand. The key point, Marcus explained, as they refined their main argument, is that humans don't want to be courted according to some universal formula. We want to feel like our individual preferences and boundaries are respected. Zix nodded, their forearms working to update the holographic displays. So instead of recommending specific courtship behaviors, we should recommend asking humans about their preferences? Exactly. Treat dating like a conversation, not a conquest. As dawn broke over Europa Station, they had transformed Zix's research from a behavioral analysis into something that looked more like a diplomatic protocol. The new presentation emphasized consent, communication, and cultural sensitivity. There is one problem, Zix said as they reviewed their work. The coalition specifically requested actionable data on human romantic behavior. They may be disappointed by a presentation that essentially tells them to ask humans what they want. Let them be disappointed, Marcus replied. Would you rather give them accurate information or comfortable lies? Among my people, scientific accuracy is always preferred, Zix said. But I am not certain other species share this priority. They were interrupted by an urgent chime from Marcus's communication device. To his surprise, Sarah's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired, but her expression was less hostile than it had been the day before. Marcus, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, Sarah said. I did some research on your roommate, and I found some interesting information. Can we meet? I think there's something you should know. Marcus glanced at Zix, who was trying to look inconspicuous while obviously listening to every word. Sure, where do you want to meet? The Coalition Archives. There's something there you both need to see. An hour later, Marcus and Zix found Sarah waiting for them in the archive's main research chamber. She looked professional in her work clothes, and Marcus was reminded that she was actually a communications specialist for the station's diplomatic corps. I wasn't entirely honest with you yesterday, Sarah began, looking directly at Zix. When I said my friend saw someone taking pictures of our date, I didn't mention that my friend works for Coalition Security. She ran your image through the diplomatic database. Zix's skin went pale blue. I can explain. You don't need to, Sarah interrupted. I know who you are, Dr. Zixathera. I've read your previous work on Zerani social structures and Boolean communication patterns. You're actually a respected xenoanthropologist. Marcus looked between Sarah and his roommate in confusion. Wait, you knew about Zix's research? Not specifically, Sarah admitted. But I know that cultural misunderstandings between humans and other species have been causing diplomatic problems. When I realized what was really happening, I decided to help rather than just stay angry. She led them to a computer terminal and pulled up a series of incident reports from the Coalition's diplomatic archives. Look at this, Sarah said, scrolling through the files. In the past 6 months, there have been over 40 formal complaints filed by human citizens about inappropriate courtship behavior from other species. Some of these are just cultural misunderstandings, but others? Marcus read over her shoulder, his eyes widening at the reports. A Gorn diplomat had challenged a human woman's boyfriend to mortal combat as part of what he believed was proper courtship protocol. A group of Ferengi traders had tried to purchase a human man's romantic interest by offering his parents an impressive dowry. Most disturbing of all, several species had interpreted human playing hard to get as a literal mating challenge that required persistence, despite clear rejection. These incidents are escalating, Sarah continued. The Coalition Council is under pressure to establish clear guidelines for interspecies romantic interactions, especially involving humans. That's why they requested your research so urgently. Zix looked stricken. I had no idea my work was being used to address such serious situations. The question is, Sarah said, turning to face both of them, are you going to give them what they think they want, or what they actually need? Marcus felt a surge of affection for Sarah's directness and insight. We've been working on that exact problem all night. We think the Coalition is asking the wrong questions. Show me, Sarah said. For the next hour, Marcus and Zix walked Sarah through their revised presentation. She listened carefully, occasionally asking questions or suggesting improvements. Marcus found himself impressed by her diplomatic experience and cultural awareness. This is good, Sarah said when they finished. But you're going to face resistance from council members who want simple, actionable guidelines they can distribute to their species. What do you suggest? Zix asked. Sarah smiled, and Marcus felt his heart skip a beat at the familiar expression. You make it personal. Don't just tell them about human preferences in abstract terms. Show them real examples of successful interspecies relationships. Are there any? Marcus asked doubtfully. More than you'd think, Sarah replied. I've been researching it since yesterday. There are human-alien couples throughout Coalition space, but they've succeeded because they built their relationships on mutual understanding and respect, not because they followed some cultural playbook. She pulled up a new set of files, showing images and brief biographies of various interspecies couples. Marcus was surprised to see how many there were, and how diverse the pairings could be. The key factor in every successful relationship was communication, Sarah explained. The non-human partners took time to understand their human companions as individuals, not as representatives of their species. This is exactly the point we were trying to make, Marcus said excitedly. Relationships are about individuals, not species. Then let's prove it, Sarah said, her eyes sparkling with the kind of enthusiasm that had first attracted Marcus to her. Zix looked between them with growing interest. Are you suggesting that we include live testimony from successful interspecies couples in our presentation? Even better, Sarah said. I'm suggesting we demonstrate the principles in real time. Marcus felt confused. How? Sarah looked directly at him, her expression serious but warm. Marcus, I was angry yesterday because I felt like I was being treated as a research subject instead of a person. But after seeing what you and Zix have put together, I realized that your roommate was genuinely trying to understand humans, not exploit them. I deeply regret any distress my research methods caused, Zix interjected formally. I now understand that consent and respect are fundamental to ethical cross-species interaction, which is exactly what the Coalition needs to hear, Sarah said. But more than that, they need to see how these principles work in practice. Marcus still didn't understand where she was going with this. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting, Sarah said with a slight smile, that we show them how a human and an alien can build a real friendship based on mutual respect and understanding. She gestured to Marcus and Zix. Look at what you two have accomplished in one night. You started as roommates. Zix treated Marcus like a research subject. Marcus got angry and hurt, but then you both chose to work together to find a better way. That's exactly the kind of relationship model the Coalition needs to see. Marcus looked at his roommate, realizing that Sarah was right. Despite all the chaos and misunderstanding, he and Zix had somehow managed to build something that looked like actual friendship. Are you saying we should present ourselves as a case study? Zix asked. I'm saying you should present yourselves as proof that understanding is possible, Sarah corrected. Not as a perfect example to be copied, but as evidence that different species can learn to respect and care about each other when they approach relationships with honesty and good intentions. Marcus felt a warm glow spreading through his chest as he realized what Sarah was really saying. She wasn't just offering to help with the presentation. She was offering to give them another chance, to see if they could build something real together based on the principles they were advocating. Would you be willing to work with us on this? Marcus asked, hardly daring to hope. I think I'd like that, Sarah replied. And the smile she gave him made everything they'd been through feel worthwhile. As they began planning their new approach to the Coalition presentation, Marcus couldn't help but think that sometimes the most important discoveries came not from studying others, but from learning to understand yourself. And sometimes the best relationships began with the courage to admit when you'd been wrong, and the wisdom to try a different way. The Coalition Council chambers were more intimidating than Marcus had imagined. Representatives from dozens of species filled the amphitheater-style seating. Their various forms of eyes, sensors, and attention-focusing organs directed toward the presentation platform where he, Zix, and Sarah stood. Council Leader Thavar, a imposing Andorian with piercing blue eyes, called the session to order. Dr. Zixathera, the Council has reviewed your preliminary research on human reproductive behavior. We understand you have insights that could help prevent future diplomatic incidents involving romantic misunderstandings. Zix stepped forward, their forearms trembling slightly with nerves. Honored Council members, I must begin by acknowledging that my original research approach was fundamentally flawed. A murmur of confusion rippled through the assembly. Several representatives leaned forward with increased interest. I approached the study of human relationships as if they were a behavioral algorithm that could be decoded and replicated. Zix continued. This was a critical error that led to ethical violations and, more importantly, a complete misunderstanding of what human relationships actually represent. Ambassador Topol from Vulcan raised her hand. Are you saying your research findings are invalid? I am saying that any attempt to create a universal protocol for romantic interaction with humans is doomed to failure, Zix replied firmly. Because such protocols fundamentally misunderstand the nature of human emotional bonding. Marcus watched the assembled representatives, many of whom looked skeptical or confused. A Gorn delegate rumbled something that the universal translator rendered as, "Then how are we to court human females without causing offense?" That, Sarah said, stepping forward, is exactly the wrong question. She activated the holographic display system, showing the diplomatic incident reports they had reviewed the previous day. For the past 6 months, representatives from various species have attempted to court humans using their own cultural frameworks, Sarah explained. A Nausicaan tried to prove his worthiness by defeating the human woman's previous romantic partners in combat. A Ferengi delegation attempted to negotiate marriage contracts with a human man's family without consulting the man himself. In every case, the approach treated humans as if we were just another species whose mating behaviors could be studied and mimicked. And this approach is incorrect? Asked a crystalline Tholian representative, their translated voice carrying harmonic overtones. Completely, Marcus said, joining the presentation. Because you're not trying to mate with our species. You're trying to build relationships with individual humans, and every human is different. Zix activated a new display showing their revised research findings. My roommate Marcus helped me understand that human relationships are not governed by species-wide behavioral patterns, but by individual preferences, personal history, and emotional compatibility. Dr. Zixathera interrupted a stern Klingon counselor. You speak of your research subject as if he were a colleague rather than an object of study. Because he is, Zix replied without hesitation. And that realization represents the most important finding of my entire research project. The council chamber fell silent as the implications of this statement sank in. Explain, Council Leader Thavar commanded. Marcus felt his heart racing as he stepped forward to address the assembled representatives. When Zix first started studying me, I felt like a lab rat. Everything I did was analyzed, cataloged, and turned into data points. It was dehumanizing and invasive. But when we started working together as partners, Sarah added, when Zix began treating Marcus as a consultant rather than a subject, they learned more about human relationships in one night than they had in months of observation. The key insight, Zix explained, is that successful interspecies relationships cannot be built on behavioral mimicry or cultural appropriation. They require genuine communication, mutual respect, and individual understanding. A Bolian representative stood up. This sounds like philosophical idealism. We need practical guidance for preventing diplomatic incidents. Then let us provide it, Sarah said confidently. She gestured, and the holographic display changed to show a simple communication framework. Instead of studying human courtship behaviors, we recommend this approach: ask, listen, respect, adapt. Marcus took over the explanation. Ask humans about their individual preferences instead of assuming universal patterns. Listen to their responses without trying to fit them into your cultural framework. Respect their boundaries and choices even if they differ from your species' norms, and adapt your approach based on what you learn about that specific person. This seems overly simplistic, observed a pack-led delegate. Simple, but not easy, Zix corrected. It requires abandoning the assumption that romantic relationships can be reduced to predictable protocols. It demands that you treat each human as a unique individual worthy of understanding and respect. Furthermore, Sarah continued, it requires acknowledging that not every human will be interested in an interspecies relationship, and that rejection should be accepted gracefully, rather than viewed as a challenge to overcome. The Gorn delegate who had spoken earlier rumbled again. But how are we to know if our courtship efforts are welcome without universal guidelines? The same way humans figure it out with each other, Marcus replied. Through communication. You ask if someone is interested in getting to know you better. You pay attention to their response. If they say no, you respect that decision. If they say yes, you continue the conversation and see where it leads. And if cultural differences create misunderstandings, asked the Vulcan ambassador, then you acknowledge the misunderstanding, apologize if necessary, and use it as an opportunity to learn more about each other, Sarah explained. Successful relationships, whether romantic or diplomatic, are built on the willingness to work through differences with patience and good faith. Zix activated their final display, showing the transformed research findings. My original study cataloged 347 distinct human courtship behaviors across 23 cultural subgroups. But this data is essentially useless for anyone seeking to build an actual relationship with a human. The revised findings focus on communication strategies, consent protocols, and conflict resolution techniques that can be adapted for any interspecies interaction, Marcus added. These skills are useful not just for romantic relationships but for diplomatic, commercial, and social connections as well. Council leader Thavar leaned forward with interest. You are suggesting that the solution to our romantic diplomacy problems is better general communication? We are suggesting that romance is just a specific application of general relationship skills, Sarah confirmed, and that these skills can be learned and practiced by any species willing to approach other beings with curiosity, respect, and genuine interest in understanding them as individuals. A long silence fell over the chamber as the council members processed this new perspective. Marcus could see various representatives conferring quietly with their advisors. Finally, the crystalline Tholian spoke again. This approach would require significant changes to how many species conduct diplomatic courtship. Yes, Zix agreed. It would require treating potential romantic partners as equals rather than conquests. It would mean accepting rejection as a valid response rather than a problem to solve. And it would demand patience, empathy, and genuine interest in another being's welfare. In other words, Marcus said, looking around the chamber, it would require the same qualities that make for good diplomacy in general. Ambassador T'Pol raised an eyebrow. A logical observation. You are suggesting that successful romantic relationships and successful diplomatic relationships are built on the same foundation. Exactly, Sarah confirmed. Mutual respect, open communication, and genuine interest in understanding different perspectives. The Klingon counselor stood up abruptly. This is all very philosophical, but what of the Klingon tradition of courtship through combat? Are we to abandon our cultural heritage? Not at all, Zix replied diplomatically. But you would need to ensure that any human you were interested in actually wanted to participate in such traditions. Some might find the concept exciting and romantic. Others might find it terrifying or offensive. The key is asking first and respecting the answer. And if a human woman wished to court a Klingon male according to our traditions, the counselor pressed, then you would have a fascinating opportunity to share your culture with someone genuinely interested in understanding it, Marcus replied. That's what real relationships are about, two individuals choosing to explore each other's worlds together. As the presentation continued, Marcus realized that something remarkable was happening. The council members were beginning to engage with their ideas not just as diplomatic policy, but as personal guidance. Representatives were asking questions about their own cross-species relationships, sharing their own experiences with cultural misunderstandings, and discussing how these principles might apply beyond romantic contexts. 6 months later, Marcus sat in the same cafe where Sarah had confronted him about Zix's research, but this time the conversation was entirely different. Sarah sat across from him, her hand resting comfortably in his, while Zix occupied a specially designed chair that accommodated their unique physiology. I still cannot believe the council voted unanimously to adopt our relationship protocols, Zix said, carefully managing a human-style coffee cup with two of their four hands. The interspecies relationship guidelines have been implemented across all coalition territories. And more importantly, Sarah added with a grin, there hasn't been a single diplomatic incident involving inappropriate courtship behavior since the guidelines were published. Marcus squeezed Sarah's hand gently. I think the real victory is that species are actually talking to each other instead of making assumptions. The past 6 months had brought changes none of them could have anticipated. Zix's presentation had not only resolved the immediate crisis, but had sparked a galaxy-wide conversation about interspecies relationships. The coalition had established new cultural exchange programs, communication training for diplomats, and support networks for interspecies couples. More personally, Marcus and Sarah had slowly rebuilt their relationship on the foundation of honesty and communication that they had advocated to the council. It hadn't been easy. There were still moments when Marcus felt self-conscious about Zix's continued presence in their lives, and times when Sarah needed space to process the unique complexities of dating someone whose roommate was a published expert on human romance, but they had worked through each challenge by applying the same principles they had taught the galaxy. Ask, listen, respect. Adapt, Dr. Chen. A familiar voice called from across the cafe. Marcus turned to see Ambassador T-Pole approaching their table with what passed for a smile on Vulcan features. Ambassador, Marcus stood to greet her. How are the new diplomatic protocols working out? Quite effectively, T-Pole replied. I wanted to personally thank you all for your contribution to interspecies relations. The number of successful cross-cultural partnerships has increased by 340% since the implementation of your guidelines. We're glad we could help, Sarah said warmly. T'Pol turned to Zix with particular interest. Dr. Zix-Thara, I understand you have been asked to head the new Interspecies Relationship Research Institute? Zix's skin flushed a pleased shade of deeper blue. The position has been offered, yes. I am still considering whether to accept. What's holding you back? Marcus asked, genuinely curious. Zix looked between their human friends with an expression that had become much more readable over the months. The position would require relocating to the coalition capital on Risa. I would no longer be able to maintain our current living arrangement. Marcus felt a pang of sadness at the thought of losing his roommate, but also pride in how far Zix had come. That sounds like an incredible opportunity. You'd be able to help even more species understand each other. Yes, Zix agreed slowly. But I have learned that professional advancement is not the only consideration in making life decisions. I have grown, attached to our current situation. Sarah looked touched by Zix's admission. Attached how? I believe humans would describe it as friendship, Zix said carefully. I have discovered that sharing daily experiences with individuals I care about provides a form of satisfaction that professional achievement alone cannot match. Marcus grinned at his roommate's clinical description of friendship. Zix, are you saying you'd miss us? I am saying, Zix replied with as much dignity as they could muster, that I have learned to value personal relationships alongside professional ones. This represents a significant evolution in my psychological development, which is exactly why you should take the job, Sarah said firmly. You can teach other species what you've learned about friendship and connection. And besides, it's not like we won't stay in touch. Ambassador T'Pol observed their interaction with obvious interest. If I may offer a personal observation, your friendship represents precisely the kind of interspecies relationship that the galaxy needs more of. Dr. Zix-Thara, your work at the Institute could help other species develop similar connections. You really think so? Zix asked, their large eyes reflecting hope and uncertainty. I know so, Marcus said confidently. You've already proven that understanding between species is possible. Now you can help others learn how to build their own bridges. Over the next hour, they discussed the details of Zix's potential new position. The Institute would research not just romantic relationships, but all forms of interspecies social bonding, friendships, working partnerships, family-style connections, and community building. It was exactly the kind of work that Zix's unique perspective and hard-won wisdom about individual relationships could illuminate. There is one condition I would want to negotiate, Zix said as they prepared to leave the cafe. What's that? Sarah asked. I would want to establish a research partnership with Europa Station, regular field studies examining successful long-term interspecies relationships. Zix looked meaningfully at Marcus and Sarah. I believe I know an excellent test case. Marcus laughed. Are you asking if you can study our relationship? I am asking if you would be willing to participate as partners in ongoing research, Zix corrected. With full informed consent, complete transparency about methods and findings, and veto power over any conclusions drawn from observational data. In other words, Sarah said with amusement, the complete opposite of how you started studying Marcus. Precisely, Zix agreed without embarrassment. I have learned that ethical research requires treating subjects as collaborators rather than specimens. As they walked back toward their apartment building, Marcus reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this point. What had started as an awkward roommate situation and spiraled into a galactic diplomatic crisis had ultimately become something none of them had expected. A genuine friendship that transcended species boundaries. You know what the strangest part of all this is? Marcus said as they waited for the transport. What? Sarah asked. A year ago, I thought the most exciting thing about living with an alien would be learning about their culture. I never imagined that the real adventure would be teaching them about friendship. Zix tilted their head in that familiar gesture of curiosity. And what have you learned from the experience? Marcus thought for a moment. That understanding someone isn't about cataloging their behaviors or predicting their responses. It's about caring enough to keep asking questions, even when the answers surprise you. And sometimes, Sarah added, slipping her arm through Marcus's, the best relationships come from the most unexpected places. Indeed, Zix agreed, their skin shifting to the warm blue shade that Marcus had learned indicated contentment. I believe humans have a saying about this phenomenon. Which one? Marcus asked. Home is where the heart is, Zix replied carefully, though I am still researching the precise biological mechanisms involved in cardiac-based navigation. Marcus and Sarah burst into laughter, and even Zix's stern expression cracked into what might charitably be called a smile. 3 weeks later, Marcus and Sarah stood in the spaceport, watching Zix board the transport to Risa. Their friend had accepted the position at the Institute and was embarking on a new phase of their career and their life. Take care of yourself, Sarah said, surprising Zix with a gentle hug that the alien returned awkwardly but warmly. And remember, Marcus added, if you ever need research subjects for a study on long-distance interspecies friendship, you know where to find us, I will remember, Zix promised. And Marcus, thank you for teaching me that the most important data cannot be quantified. As Zix's transport disappeared into the starfield, Marcus felt Sarah's hand slip into his. So, she said with a mischievous grin, how does it feel to be a case study in successful human romantic behavior? Like the luckiest lab rat in the galaxy, Marcus replied, pulling her close for a kiss that no amount of scientific analysis could ever fully explain. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns and across the galaxy. Countless species were learning that the greatest discovery of all was simply learning to understand each other, and sometimes if they were very lucky, they might even learn to care.